Hello everyone, how are you doing? I hope that you are doing so very well. Today I'm here with my friend Stephanie, and also Tinkerbell is joining us. Stephanie is my in real life friend who actually introduced me to the book club that I'm part of now that you guys have heard me talk about in wrap-ups. And at last book club, she mentioned she was reading The Zookeeper'S Wife, and I was like, oh, I'm about to do a review on that. Do you want to come and join me for this review? So she's here to talk about The Zookeeper'S Wife with me. Focus Features sent me The Zookeeper'S Wife ahead of the film's release to review and also to do a giveaway for all of you. The giveaway is for a signed copy of The Zookeeper'S Wife and a tote bag. I'll leave links and all the information for the giveaway down below and you can go check it out. The Zookeeper'S Wife is about a couple named Jan and Antonia. They are zookeepers in Warsaw, Poland during the Second World War, and it really just follows their life during the entirety of the Second World War. What really started the war was the invasion of Poland, so they were occupied for that entire time. It goes through losing the animals and also how they hid Jews and really trafficked Jews through their house throughout the entire World War, and Jan in this book is part of the Polish underground. It's just a really fascinating story about an incredible family.
I don't know if you can say that there's a beautiful story about the Holocaust, but I think Diane Ackerman did a really great job of piecing together really dark parts of our history with these beautiful images of animals in the zoo and how the animal world worked in contrast with how dark the human world had become. And I really loved it. I thought for a nonfiction book, the pace kept up really well for the most part. There were a couple parts where we were talking about like beetles that I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't need to know this much about beetles. Then it would pick back up into history of Jan and Antonia and how they were dealing with that in their household. I really loved all the stories about Rice and his pets in the story, especially Badger, how that dynamic in their household worked of bringing in these basically Jewish refugees that had been their friends and neighbors for a long time, keeping them in the house, giving them animal names, hiding them in the cages. That was a beautiful story about a really, really dark time.
I see now her name is Antonina.
Antonina.
I thought it was Antonia the whole time, literally the whole book.
I was pretty sure I, in my head, was mispronouncing every single name from the book because I was like,
True.
Is it Jan or Jan? Is it Reese, Rice?
Oh, yeah.
And then like all of their other friends like Magdalena. That was maybe the only one I felt like 80% sure I was pronouncing correctly.
If you like nonfiction, you'll probably like this a lot. Know going in that it's nonfiction.
Yeah, you just have to prepare yourself that it is nonfiction. It reads a lot like fiction at some points, like you forget you're reading a nonfiction book, but then there are those moments where we go really deep into details or a story where you're like, oh yeah,
this is
nonfiction. Just prepare yourself and I think you'll really love it.
I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. What did you
I also gave this a 4 out of 5
Wow,
stars.
look at us. There were still those moments of like, wow, this is really nonfiction. That was why it was a 4, but it's just like the story bleeds through even the dull points because it's such a fascinating story that it needs to be told.
You'll find yourself reading this book being that annoying person to your friends like, did you know that during World War II?
Exactly.
Like, it's incredible how much we still don't know with as much information that is out there on the internet and with movies and what we already do know, how much I learned from this book.
I feel like I haven't seen a lot of stories about Poland specifically from this time period because they were in the trenches the entire time.
I thought that was interesting as well. I read a lot of historical fiction on World War II, have read a lot of nonfiction about World War II, and this was the first book that I had read from a Polish perspective, and now reading it makes you wonder why, because there's so much that happened in that country, so much history, but I think a lot of the stories were destroyed along with the people, and oh my gosh, heartbreaking talking about the evacuation of the Warsaw Ghetto really got me.
I just came away from this book like even angrier about just different pieces of history that you don't know if that happened.
Yeah.
I found the Polish people just very inspiring because they really fought back the whole time. They started by fighting back and they had the underground happening, and I feel like a lot of people, at least in Warsaw, it felt like were hiding people. The majority of people were trying to hide their Jewish neighbors and trying to get them out of the ghetto.
I found it really profound that she kept on bringing up the stories of these artists, and music was a theme throughout the book of just like that the Poles really didn't lose their culture and who they were. This war happened, it was so devastating, but in some ways it didn't really break the Polish spirit, that we still would have the Foxman playing music in the house, Magdalena who is the sculptor. I loved those stories of art coming through and how people used their what seemed like random gifts and talents in the house to really aid the underground. I thought the story of the beauty baby school
That's
was
what I was
so
gonna say.
interesting. How like literally it was debutante school basically of how to become a Catholic.
Well, like how to see
yeah.
Polish. I feel like they mentioned that they did some plastic surgery for
Yes.
their noses so that they could pass as non-Jews. And also there was like a lady who was in government who literally kept her office like a huge mess. Like there were papers everywhere so that she could hide underground papers in that mess so that whenever Nazi forces came in and like looked at her office, they didn't want to go through anything because there was so much and it was overwhelming. And in that mess, she kept all the underground papers and filed through legal documents and things to get people out of the country.
I also like the contrast she set up, which was sad. At the beginning of the book, talking about how the Nazis were trying to keep these pure breeds of horses and wild bison, and how that thinking about even animals played into the treatment of the Jews, and how some of the concentration camps came about because they're trying to create this perfect Aryan race, but they were also trying to create a perfect German world of where we were going to overtake this whole other country, this whole other culture, this whole other ecosystem, and make it German, preserving the line of those horses and the bison and like the different type of bulls. They took that same mentality and just applied it to people, which was so horrifying. And I can't imagine what it was like for Jan and Antonina to see that happening, like literally right in front of their eyes, because their zoo played a huge part in like keeping those pure races of horses, and then seeing how that same thinking was being applied to their friends and neighbors.
Yeah, I feel like their story was just so unique and interesting. Also, I feel like they were just super blessed. They had a lot of close calls. Antonina had a huge gift for calming animals.
Yeah, like her sixth sense.
Yeah, like she has a sixth sense for calming animals, and it applied to like even situations with German soldiers, but they just had like crazy situations and like close calls like that where people would come in or like dart in. They would do this thing where they played the piano. Go, go, go to Crete. Was that what it was? Antonina played that song on the piano to tell everybody in the house to get to their hiding spots. Obviously they were hiding Jews, but they also had like people who were Polish that were living with them to kind of put on the facade of there were all these people in and all these people out, so you never really knew who was staying at the villa, so they could hide more people. There was a whole background story about that specific play and how like there was a huge meaning even with that that they used, which was super, super cool.
And I think that's where maybe some people struggled with reading this book because it was nonfiction. You'd get to a part where like, oh yeah, this was the song they played, and then you get like 15 pages about the song. You kind of follow these rabbit trails, but if you followed them closely, you'd realize they led to like deeper meanings.
It may be even just a personal preference because my connectedness strength really likes seeing like all these different pieces like come together and make something even deeper and more meaningful. So I was like, yeah, give me all this like background history on like everything.
I also thought like many times throughout reading this book, she uses a lot of quotations from Antonina's diaries. I just don't know how mentally you go through a day like that and then you get home and you write down quotes from like things your husband said or that were said in the house, and how she would write in such great detail like day to day the things that were said. And it's amazing because without those writings this history wouldn't exist. Also, we never would have had these stories known. But I just was thinking for myself, how do you not just go into survival mode? Like what in her mind was like, we need to write all of this down. The detail with which she wrote things down was incredible to me, especially when she would talk about the things that Jan or Jan said, and she would write all these like direct quotes from him. You could tell how much her husband's words meant to her because she would just remember everything he said, hang on every word he said, and write it down in her journals. And it also proved a beautiful relationship. I think a relationship that struggled because of the war, but then also at the end finding out that they still had this beautiful relationship and how highly he spoke of her.
I can't even imagine just living in that time every single day knowing that you're hiding people and having to be on the watch and on edge for 5-6 years because Jan Yan, we don't know. I'll go see the movie and obviously I'll know how you're supposed to pronounce his name, would go off and do stuff for the underground that was extremely dangerous. But she also had all these people that she was responsible for, and if they were found out, that was the end of their entire family. Speaking of their family, their son, I can't even imagine living through this war as young, was he like 6 or 7, having to keep those secrets, and he did it really well. Keeping secrets of all the people in the house, helping make up names for people because they called different families animal names. It was a way to talk about them in public and in their house without having to worry about someone overhearing them.
I thought it was interesting and in some ways sad to watch Rice grow up through the Holocaust and the Warsaw Ghetto, to see him be so brave and then even at one point wanting to join like the underground resistance, and Jan having to tell him, no, I'm not your father, I'm your captain, you don't do things unless I instruct you to do them. And how difficult that would be as a kid. You're trying to figure out what's the world really about when you're that age, who am I, what's my role, cool to have such weight put on your shoulders of protecting all of these people, taking care of your mother, making sure your father is safe, and then just taking care of all of the animals. Rice really became like the animal caretaker when Antonina became the human caretaker. They kind of switched roles, and so he had all of his rabbits and chickens, the really mean cat.
At the end, having animals come back to the zoo was really, really meaningful. The mean cat was still there, and then Badger, who had left at like the very beginning of the war, they found him down the way and brought him back.
The resistance fighters returned him in a pickle tub because he like didn't want to be with them. I loved Badger. I kept on waiting for him to come back, so I was really happy at the end when he did come back, because I just thought that relationship with Rice and Badger was so precious at the beginning. I never would think to get a pet badger. They seem like really angry little critters, but he was so sweet and tender with Rice, and I think that just shows again like Sixth Sense relationship the family had with the animals, and that them coming back was like the new spring for the city and the zoo of like Badger returning. He's like the prodigal.
I just like keep thinking about how they used their resources and what they had to do the most that they could. It wasn't even like they thought twice about doing this. It was like, this is what you should do, this is what you have to do, this is your responsibility as a person. They don't see themselves as heroic because they're like just doing what everyone should do, but not everyone did that. If everyone did that, there probably would be a lot more people that survived the war. It's just like a really great story of using what you have to do the most that you can to help other people. I'm really excited to see the movie. Obviously it's going to be dramatized a lot. Like I can already tell from the trailer. I remember there being like a specific German soldier that was baiting Antonina, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely not in the book.
I think they're going to dramatize the movie a lot. One, they have to cut out so much to fit it in a movie and to keep the story moving like at Hollywood speed, just to see some of the drama they add in. The preview I saw really showed Antonina being down in the animal cages, like with some of the Jews they were hiding, which didn't really happen in the book at all, because she had to maintain this facade that she was entertaining guests all the time.
At the beginning, they would just go back for like thirds and seconds and fourths and be like, oh, it was so good, I'm so hungry, to go like get stuff for their guests, and their guests hid in like closets and cupboards and just like different places like that, and they would come out after dark. They had some people, I think in the pheasant house mostly, that would come in for very short times. The people they held regularly were all in their villa for the majority of the time, and they would just come out after dark.
They dug this tunnel from the villa to the pheasant house if they needed to go out there. That way it wouldn't look suspicious that they were like tending to sometimes empty animal cages of like when all the lions and things were gone, and they had people sleeping in there temporarily. They just created literally, like they call it the underground army, but they were literally underground, creating all these tunnels and little pass-throughs to get in and out of the ghetto and to get from the villa to the animal houses and the zoo without being noticed.
One thing that was insane was that the Germans kept their weapons at the zoo. How they described it is like a lot of them felt like they were off duty while they were there, so it felt a little bit safer because it was where they would drop off their weapons and pick them up the next day. But there were Germans literally at the zoo all the time. So like even having that as an added element of just stress. Also seeing Jan whatever act and how he used different situations to his advantage to help the underground. There was a German who went to a doctor in the ghetto. I don't know how that happened, but he was a doctor that he went and visited, and he knew he had this bug collection, so he came to look at specifically the bug collection and went back with this German and got through this specific gate. He was like, hey, I might actually like need to come back and ask some questions about these bugs. Can you tell these people that I might come back through here? He used every single piece in every situation that he could to help the underground.
I remember there's one moment in the story where he's trying to smuggle someone out of the ghetto using that gate and that pass that was given to him, and someone kind of questions him, and so he just acts all important, basically like, don't you know who I am? Like, how dare you question me? And then they're like, oh, sorry, like come on through. And then he smuggled several people out of the ghetto that way.
Even those simple like small nuggets of stories that you got, like the beauty school, they never backed down and gave in, and they always were fighting and always were taking care of people, and it's just really, really cool.
That's a lot of the book.
That's pretty much the book. Thanks for joining me, Stephanie, and I hope you guys enjoyed having her on here. If you liked this video, go ahead and like it and subscribe if you want to see more of my face in your screen. If you want to see more of Stephanie, maybe we could do more videos together, so let me know down below if you want to see more of her.
Yeah, subscribe. I subscribe. You should.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye. I cannot say the word club.
Book club.
Book club.
And you get a tote bag. And you get a... I can't say synopsis.
Synopsis.
Synopsis. Sixth sense.